So, brothers and sisters, today we have a very special guest with us, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. Tony is with us now, and before he starts to speak, I'm going to let him know that we got about 4 or 5 questions to ask you in a little bit, Tony, so from some of our board members. But the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Ben. It is an honor, Mr. President, and it is an honor to be before CSEA virtually. I want to thank you all. First of all, I wouldn't be in this role were it not for your support. So thank you. These are clearly uncharted times that we are dealing in, and trying to support 6 million students and 1,000 school districts and all of our incredible educators who are classified, who work with our students, has been an unprecedented effort, and it has required help from everyone. I just have to say how much I appreciate you. I'm thankful to you for all you do for our 6 million students. So many of you, I understand, are out to make it possible for our students who are really, getting their meals, breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner at 5,000 different locations across our state. Thank you for what you do. This is not easy. I know that there have been times when it's been hard to get personal protective equipment as you're doing your work. And I just want you to know that we're working closely with your government affairs team. David Shapira has been on my speed dial nonstop. He's probably sick of me asking him, but every single day I've asked him to help us work out labor disputes with management, and he's been an incredible partner and facilitator. Your entire government affairs team has just been incredible. Dolores and Jai and your team in Sacramento is the best, bar none. And we're grateful to work with you all. Obviously, we're going into the 10th week of being in this place where distance learning is the only way we can serve our students in order to keep them and their families safe. And that's been tough on everybody. There have been bumps on everyone with the distance learning. As you know, CDE has been putting out guidance on how to deal with meals and how to open childcare centers, has been providing guidance on how to do distance learning. And one of the biggest challenges that we've encountered is that many of our students simply don't have a computer and internet. And so, we don't think that a computer is enough to educate a student, but it's a great tool to keep our students connected. And so I've named the task force to help close the digital divide. We're working on getting big companies to make donations to help our students get computers and internet. I want to make sure that everyone at CSEA knows, if you yourself find that you need access to lower cost internet or free internet, that we have made the internet service providers do more with free and reduced internet. If they ask you for a social security card or number or your credit history, you tell them that Tony Thurmond said, I don't need to do that, because we don't want them bothering people for unnecessary documents. We want them just to provide internet access. I also want to just let you know that everyone's asking about when school is going to open. That decision will be made by every individual school district. But we want you to know that I've appointed a task force that is working on figuring out how to get it to be safe for schools to reopen. Again, David is one of the leaders of this task force. We have a group that's focused on what we call health and safety. He's been holding the line to make sure that there's going to be enough PPE and cleaning products and sanitizing products and a good understanding of how to make it safe for all of you who work in our schools and do incredible things as educators to help our kids. And so there won't be a common opening. The decision will be up to each individual school district, but we at CDE are putting together guidance that will help to ensure that there is safety. And that guidance is informed by classified employees, by teachers, by administrators and educational leaders all across the board. We're also making sure that we consult with health experts and Cal OSHA to make sure that our workplaces and schools would be safe. We don't want anybody going back to a school campus where they're going to be unsafe. And so we're going to hold the line to make sure that there's safety for everyone. So again, from the bottom of my heart, a great deal of thanks. to each and every one of you for what you do for our students. I'm a parent, and so I'm also grateful for you from the standpoint of being a parent. I want to answer your questions, and just know that there's some questions still being figured out, but we're going to figure it out together. If I could just say, borrow from some of your expressions, we are stronger together, and I'm all in, and we're going to do this together on behalf of our 6 million students and all of you who help to serve them.
Thank you, Tony. Like I said, we have a few questions for you. First off, the thank you part, that's amazing. Our members don't hear those 2 words enough. So I just really, last month we heard them from Gavin Newsom, and now we're hearing them from you. Realize what 2 little words go an awful long way. So thank you for expressing a thanks for everything that they do. First up, we have our Area E Director, Carmen Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, thank you for being here with us, Tony. So I know that David is working with your department, other education labor groups and management groups to put together a checklist for school reopening. I'm curious as to whether that checklist will be mandatory or not. Will the districts have to complete everything on that checklist before they reopen, or is it just a suggestion, a list of suggestions, or something in between?
Thanks for the question, Carmen. It's what we're trying to
Should I
do
repeat that?
is establish what has to be sort of a mandatory minimum level that must be in place at every school before students return to campus, and that must be in place to support our employees, classified and otherwise. And so it's a little bit tricky because California Department of Education does not have the ability to mandate what school districts do. But we're preparing guidance that spells out how to reopen. But what we've done, and David's made this really clear, it cannot be different across districts, and it has to be uniform in meeting those standards. And so what we're doing is we're leaning on the Department of Public Health from the state and Cal OSHA. And Cal OSHA has joined our work. They're at our table, and they're going to make sure that every school is adhering to the guidelines for safety, and that will be uniform and consistent across the state.
Thank you. Next, we have Area G Director Ivan Pastrano.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Superintendent Thurmond, for being here today. Our membership, we really appreciate you taking the time and committing to us to be here and answer our questions. So my name is Ivan Pastrano, the Area G Director on the CSEA Board of Directors, and Area G represents just under 27,000 classified school employees in the Los Angeles County area. And so I personally work in the maintenance department at the East Whittier City School District, and there are discussions being had right now about returning to work and what does that look like. So we know the governor has committed to purchasing masks for the safety of employees. And I know you were just talking about safety and working with Cal OSHA and stuff. But what can you personally or your department commit to doing to make sure that as our membership return to physically working at their school sites, that they'll be supplied with the proper protective equipment? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I mean, we've started the conversation. My department allocated the money that came from the state legislature to purchase the PPE. $100 million was allocated early on during COVID-19 for PPE, and my office allocated that to each and every district. It became clear from David and other representatives that school districts weren't always providing the PPE for classified staff. Some of it was a supply issue. There's been difficulty getting supplies, and some of it has just been, people. I don't even know how else to explain the rest. But what we did immediately was we pulled in the Office of Emergency Services, and we said, look, we cannot ask our classified partners to do work without the proper equipment and the proper PPE. And so, I put together a group that has, CSEA members, classified members, others, management folks, and the Office of Emergency Services as our link to ensuring that there is PPE that is necessary. Now, some of you know that the California Department of Education also has food distribution workers and staff who deliver food to school sites. And so in that respect, we've also entered into the conversation about how to get masks, and we will be happy to help you if you let us know where you need the product. If you have a request, we'll be happy to make that ask together. Let David know, and we'll make that ask together. And if we have it in stock, we will provide it to schools where we can. And so we're committed to working with you to make sure that you have what you need. And, one of the things that I'm able to do because of my position is just use the microphone that I'm given to make sure that your needs, when they're not being heard, that they reach the highest person in our state. That's our governor. And you can be sure if you're having a problem getting equipment, I'm going to be all over his cell line so he understands what you need, because he has laid out PPE is one of the most important factors to being able to open schools safely. Now, I believe he means it when he says he wants you to have the PPE, but sometimes the wheels of government move slow and something happens that makes it difficult for the folks who are at the school site level. And, please bubble up your concerns to David, and we'll make sure to get them to the mid-level managers and to ultimately the top manager, the governor, if we have to make sure that you get what you need.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Adam Weinberger, our second vice president.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Tony, Superintendent Tony Thurmond, for joining us this month. We're lucky to have Governor Newsom last month, and then you join us this month. So I know our members appreciate seeing you log on in today and addressing them. My question is, our field department, our field office staff have worked very hard over the last 2 months to get MOUs executed between our local bargaining units and their employers. We finally have MOUs that address school closure in most of the districts we represent, but very few districts have agreed to anything about school reopening. I feel very strongly that the next couple months must be used to hammer out agreements and reopening during the COVID crisis. Do you agree that a local labor management agreement on reopening during the COVID crisis must be made before a school or district reopens?
Well, I do. Frankly put, yes. I don't think there can be any questions about how someone enters before they enter. And so we're taking advantage of the time that we have right now to create the pathway for those agreements to be made. And we know this is not easy. And we know that we have to also work quickly. Now, by my count, we're actually charting when schools are open. And by my count, most schools are sticking with their traditional opening dates, late August, some are early September. Some have even asked for more time to make sure that we get this right. And so what we're doing is tracking those opening dates so that we know sort of the deadlines that we need to get this done by. But we also want to give districts time. Districts are going to want to bargain, and bargaining groups are going to want to bargain with the districts. We know that there's going to need to be time to answer all those questions that have to be answered. And so we're moving fast. And every week, we're going to try to provide a few more highlights of what's in our guidance package so that districts can be actively talking with their employee groups. We understand, because as you indicated, that the process to move to distance learning was delayed at times because of difficulties between labor and management. And David was one of the leaders at the table. I personally called labor and management leaders from across the state, all the state organizations, to come together to work on a kind of template that would clarify many of the questions about how we move to distance learning. And it took a while, and it was hard, and it was frustrating at times, I'll be honest. But it did help to create the kinds of agreement and peace accords and labor accord that we need at the local district level. And so having had that experience, I know that we have to work very quickly on the guidance so that districts and employee bargaining groups have time to work out all the questions that they need to answer. We don't want anybody coming to school having a doubt in their mind because this involves safety. Now, I admit that the process will be bumpy from time to time. I admit there'll be times when we may not know the answers together, because none of us have ever dealt with anything like this in our lifetime. But we have to answer them together, and that's the way in which I'm trying to lead. And we don't want anybody to be put in harm's way, and we don't want there to be unanswered questions. We want us to work hard to get those answered together.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Area K Director, B. Mora.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Mr. Thurmond.
Hi.
You know very well that those of us who work in school transportation know that during hard times, our students suffer. A possible example of suffering is being debated in districts across the state right now as they consider doing away with home to school transportation or extending the walking distance for regular education students. The idea that only students with special needs deserve safe transportation to school is a dangerous idea if applied in any of our communities. My question, and of course it had to be reworded properly, what can the state do to prevent this from happening? How will the state make sure that we are not putting students at risk in our school districts that choose to eliminate transportation? Will there be strict guidelines coming from CDE about ensuring student safety in districts that make these dangerous decisions? Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say, I thought your question was perfectly worded. So thank you. And I just want to acknowledge right up front that there are probably some aspects of the transportation issue that I may need a little bit more background on. I'm a little bit rusty. I used to deal with these quite a bit when I was on the school board, but that goes back more than many years actually. And so as I understood your question, it isn't just related to transportation because of COVID-19, but in general. And I know that many school districts have essentially cut out all transportation except for as it relates to students who have disabilities as a financial matter. And before COVID-19, I took a few trips to Washington, D.C. to say, hey, we need more money in California to support our students with disabilities because we are underfunded by the federal government and have been for a long time. For a state of our size, we get a very small share for a state of our size. And so I'm interested in how we can work together and work with CSEA on the issues related to transportation. To be honest, CDE doesn't have a way to mandate transportation being provided, and that districts make local decisions based on their financial ability. But what we can do is work together to ensure that any decisions being made are being made within the scope of what's in the law and what's within the best interest of students. And where there is a gap, meaning if there is a gap for students who have to travel far distances or the travel creates a hardship, I would be willing to take this up as a new conversation, CDE partnering with CSEA and others to figure out how else we might address it. What I'm saying is, I don't want to just bury my head in the sand on an issue that we know that needs to be addressed. And while I don't have an immediate answer for you, I'm suggesting that we partner together to look at these issues and define solutions. Would that be okay? Thanks for the thumbs up.
All right.
Thank you. We're so used to using thumbs up. Sorry, Ben.
Actually, thumbs up is perfect in a Zoom world because it's a great way to say, I hear you and I agree. I'm glad that you gave me one of these and not one of these. So, but I know that David will keep us connected so that we can take some time to follow up on the issue that you raised so I can get a little bit of background and then we can think about where we need to go to find a solution.
Thank you. We have one more question, but before our last question, brothers and sisters out there, remember if you have a question for us, put it in the question and answer box down below, not in the chat box. Your question will not get answered in the chat box, okay? In the question and answer box only. Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, our last question is from our Association Secretary, Monica Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. State Superintendent Thurmond, for being here today, joining us. Thank you for your continued advocacy for classified employees. My name is Monica Hahn. I am the Association Secretary for CSEA. I sit on the board. And as a community college employee, I am seeing firsthand the rapid shift to distance learning, not just during the closures, but in the plans for the future of K through 12 education. We all know that distance learning is not nearly as effective as face-to-face in-person instruction. It's even less effective for our brothers and sisters serving younger students, especially our students in the elementary schools. And I know that you are committed to in-person instruction. So how can you help guide the conversation of innovating the paraeducator's role in remote learning? And how can you help us to make certain that once this crisis is over, schools will return to the best practice of in-person education? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Gee, can I just say I agree with everything that you said? You know, one of my mentors once said that when someone says a great thing, you just say, I want to associate myself with the comments of my distinguished colleague. And I feel I need to invoke that because I agree with everything that you said. I do not think that it is ideal for a kindergarten student or a first grader to be sitting in front of a computer. And we know that this has put in tremendous pressure really on our parents, on many of you who've joined classroom teachers as partners, which is nothing new for classified employees. You all have already always been educational partners to classroom teachers, but in this new role, parents have been asked to partner with schools in ways where it's pressure because now you're juggling that in addition to your work. And so we actually put on, we launched a new series of, we call it a virtual support circle for parents to say, we hear you and how difficult this is, and to do your best and to know that it's okay and that it's going to be okay. You know, I think that, you know, we want to figure out how to make distance learning work well. And by the way, I would love to be able to give a shout out right now to the paraeducators, you know, who work with our students, especially our students with disabilities. You know, I get this question a lot. Many of our students have not been able to be connected to the paraeducators who work with them in a traditional classroom. And I want to figure out how we make those connections happen again, even if they have to happen right now during distance learning and then later in person. I know that our students miss the support that they get from our paraeducators. I know that our students just miss seeing these great caring adults who are important in their life. And it's actually affected the quality of education that they are receiving, that they don't have access to paraeducators and to speech and to others who support them. And so we are thinking about how to make some improvements, certainly in distance learning. You know, I'm just not a believer that a computer replaces a good educator. And I know that there are a lot of people who see this as an opportunity to somehow change the way we deliver education. I think a computer is just a tool to connect students to great educators. And I don't think you can ever replace the work that educators do. And when I say educators, I mean everybody. I mean certificated staff and classified staff. I mean everyone, because it takes the entire educational village to support our students. And so, you know, Madam Secretary, I really want to work on some ways that we can think about what the future of education might have to look like and how it might be different because of COVID-19, not as some kind of opportunity to somehow say, oh, we can cut corners now or have fewer personnel. I think this is a time for us to really have a thoughtful conversation about how education might have to change because of COVID-19. We know that a lot of our schools are going to reopen with a kind of blended model, meaning some in-class instruction and some distance learning. And so we're going to have to really think about how to make distance learning a little better and more effective. And I just think that COVID-19 is teaching us that we may have to change the way we do things. We may have to think about, you know, the way students learn and the way we measure learning, that it's not just about seat time or number of minutes in a seat, but our students, are they really mastering the content? And can they show us that they've mastered the content? And so all that is my way of saying that we're trying to start to think about the ways education might look different as we go forward, but we want that to be informed by practitioners. We want that to be informed by teachers and classified staff and parents and students, not just some business decision that someone's made that this is our chance to cut corners. And so I'm hopeful that you and others at CSEA will join us as we have those conversations. Obviously, we're trying to do so much all at the same time. We're trying to figure out how to keep people safe right now. We're trying to figure out how to address distance learning right now. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen during the summer, because there'll be enrichment programs during the summer to help students who may have had some learning gaps. And we're trying to figure out how to open safely. All the while, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen with COVID-19, how long it's going to be this way, when there'll be a vaccination. And so we're working hard to figure that out, but I appreciate your question because it means that we have to be thoughtful about how we use our resources in education going forward. And I'd like to invite you and others at CSEA to be a part of that conversation. I'd like to close the way I started and just again say thank you to all the members of the CSEA family. You know, over the course of my career, I've had so many great conversations with folks who have helped me to understand the broad village of educators who raise our kids. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to talk to custodians and office workers and librarian techs and food service workers and custodians and others who would tell me things that I wouldn't otherwise know and say, listen, this is important to helping our students. And I am grateful for that. And I know that this is a tough time. And but I believe we're going to get through it. I often say that many of us have not seen something like this in our lifetime. This is a worldwide pandemic. And that means that we've got to do all the things that we know that keep us safe. But as it relates to educating our kids, we have to rise to meet this challenge. And the only way we will meet it is if we rise together to do it. And as it relates to educating California kids, I'm grateful to have partners like CSEA and how we do this together. Anything that you need, I'm at your beck and call. And I just want to encourage you to continue doing the things that you're doing for our students and for each and every one of you to make sure that you continue to be safe and to be well. Thank you for inviting me into your meeting.
Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.